Hi strangers, if you're like me, you realized over the weekend that you forgot how to play a ukulele, making you a liar in all of your internet bios. Or you are a photographer who wants to talk about Lightroom catalogs and file structures. If that sounds like you, we should talk. So this video suggestion has been requested a few times, most recently by Kate. Thank you so much for the recommendation. I wouldn't have thought to make this video if it hadn't been for your suggestions, so I love when you guys make them. I mostly wouldn't have thought of showing you guys how I do one Lightroom catalog for the year because it seems so obvious to me now, like doing anything else like boggles my mind. So I'm gonna go into all the reasons that I really love using just one catalog for the year. And I have been using that system going back to at least 2013. So it's been a while. It's been a really great, like nice, trusted system for me. And if it feels like you've heard of some of this already from me, it might be because I did talk about a little bit of it in my backing up a wedding video, which I will link to below for you guys to go through. I think that this one really deserves its own video, so I am very happy to get started. So I'm gonna start just by showing you my Lightroom catalog. So this is my Lightroom catalog. It has all of my personal, wedding, engagement, etc. files for the entire year separated into two separate folders, delivered and in progress. And it should say 2019. I just realized that it did not say that. January was really hard. So this is the way that I rename my folders upon input. It's just year, month, date, category. So this is personal New York City. And then this is W for weddings, E for engagement. I have F for families. I don't have any in my editing queue right now, so you won't see those. Those will all be in delivered. And all of these files can be found on a dedicated external hard drive with only that year on it. And whenever they are initially imported, which again, you can refer to my import video for more on this, all of that raw data is transferred over to a secondary drive. And really the difference between my two drives is that the JPEGs never exist on my backup drive. Once I have completed a wedding, I put everything online, and then the JPEGs eventually get backed up to my Synology, but the backup drive that I have for the year is just raw data. I don't want to mess around with moving files around more than I have to on my backup drive. I really want to make sure that that sort of stays safe and untouched for the most part. Going back to Lightroom. Why one catalog? So the bottom line is that it's just simpler for me during all parts of the process. So I love importing everything into one catalog because it makes it really easy for me to see everything that I need to do without having to refer to a list. I do have a list, but it's just really nice for me to see, oh, this is all the stuff that I need to work on whenever I'm in editing mode. And in the culling video, you know that I really like having one catalog for the simple fact that it makes it really easy for me to filter all of my images so that I can really easily find portfolio pictures whenever it comes time for me to build my portfolio or choose images for Instagram. I also love it because the way that I deliver images ends up being in a bunch of different folders. So here is a finished wedding, and I have all the JPEGs are eventually exported into this folder and then broken up into all of these categories. So I have bride and groom and dancing, but if I say I wanted to look at just dinner and the parade at the same time, I'm able to just select those two categories and see them all together. And there isn't a great way to do that in Finder. I'm not super familiar with Bridge. There isn't a great way to do that in Photo Mechanic, seeing them all together, and I think that this is a really great feature. It's definitely something that I use a lot. I can click on the bride and groom pictures from this wedding and then go up to another wedding and do the same thing. If I'm just looking for really great client portraits, I'm able to just go into bride and groom and see bride and groom in these two, and it's going to pull up all the pictures of the couple together from 2 different weddings or 3 different weddings or as many folders as I want. I don't have to use this often, but sometimes I'll realize whenever I'm putting together like my portfolio at the end of the year or doing like a year in review post that I didn't post enough dancing photos. And so this is a really nice way for me to just select a bunch and go through and find the ones that I want without having to open up a bunch of different catalogs. I also love having everything in one catalog because I do like to move my images into different folders whenever they're completed, and Lightroom isn't crazy about you moving files. If you've ever had to relink files, it's not a hassle, it's not that big of a deal, but Lightroom is very capable of moving those files and folders for you on your computer and on your drives. So I just let it do the heavy lifting, and that way I'm never relinking anything, and Lightroom tends to keep better track of those things than I do. So another big benefit for me is that I do not work on this computer. This is a Mac Mini. It's great, but it's not a laptop. For the most part, I'm doing a lot of my culling and editing on my laptop. So say I really want to work on these 3 shoots, I'm able to select them, select all, and export all of these as a catalog to airdrop over to my MacBook. And that's usually how I end up doing a bulk of the workload, not on this computer, but by exporting the catalogs. And whenever I export it, I always export as a catalog to my desktop. And as soon as I've airdropped it over to my MacBook, I'm going to delete it from my desktop on my Mac Mini. I'll use that catalog until it's completed. And whenever it's completed, I'm able to transfer just the Lightroom catalog. I don't have to worry about the smart previews and the previews, which I originally needed to transfer over to my MacBook Pro. But I'm able to airdrop the Lightroom catalog back onto my Mac Mini, and then just go to File, Import from another catalog. And whenever I select that catalog, it's just gonna ask me if I wanna import those changes. And I do, and then I export the JPEGs from my Mac Mini. This is like my export-import computer, but everything else I mostly do on the MacBook Pro. I really like not having to transfer over like 5 different catalogs. I think it's really helpful for me and the way that I work. So if you watched my video on working with an editor, you know that you have to export individual weddings to your editor for them to have and work from. And whenever I do that, I just select the wedding, export it to my desktop, I'll zip it, send it to them, and then delete it off my drive. I don't need a bunch of little tiny catalogs flying around, and I try to leave things on my desktop that I want to delete pretty soon because I want it to be like a really obvious like pain. I just never want to deal with having multiple catalogs. So one for the year, I export things as I need them, and then I delete them whenever they get to where they need to be, because that information is always still going to be in the main catalog. I will admit that the system of having to transfer things over to my MacBook Pro can sound a little convoluted. It is an extra step that I'm adding to the process by not just like being a person that wants to work on one computer, but it's really worked well for me, and this has been my system for the past like 5 years or so. I've always had one computer that stayed in one place and like a working MacBook computer that I never directly import images to, and I'm always editing remotely using smart previews. So basically I have everything in one catalog because there's not a good reason for me not to do it. Everything about it has been really easy for me so far. Now, if you are concerned because your Lightroom is running slow and you're afraid it's because you have too many images in the catalog, I'm very happy to report that really hasn't been the case in Lightroom since like Lightroom 3 or Lightroom 4. I haven't had any issues with having really large catalogs, but there are a couple of things that you can do if your Lightroom is running slowly. That is another video that has been requested quite a few times, so that will be next month's video. It'll just be about optimizing your Lightroom so it'll run really, really fast. You can just go to File and Optimize Catalog. It said that I did this 2 weeks ago. It's important for you to occasionally optimize for some reason. I don't know why, but occasionally I just do it. For backup, I think this is the biggest concern, is that if you have everything in one place, there is the possibility that you could lose all of your work for the year, or at least all of your edits. All the raw files would still be there. So I keep an external hard drive right here hooked up to Time Machine, which is constantly backing things up. Occasionally Lightroom will prompt you, I think, upon exit unless you've told it not to. I will say that backing up one catalog occasionally is still easier to manage than having like 50 small ones that also have backups of each other. So if you do decide to go this route, or if you're considering it all, I will say that you should lay some ground rules for yourself. Like, I do not delete or remove anything from my Lightroom catalog. I have one catalog, and everything that gets imported into it stays there. I really don't like the possibility of potentially removing something. That's really scary for me. I've never had the issue of importing duplicates. I sort of addressed that in the importing and backing up a wedding video, how I do file names and how they end up not being duplicates as a result. Another thing that I do is I don't move my photos around in Finder. Again, I think that if I'm going to be doing anything with my files that are linked to Lightroom, I want to make sure that I'm moving them around, renaming them, and doing any folder or file renaming within Lightroom and letting Lightroom handle it, and that'll obviously change things in Finder. And one thing that I will say is that you will maybe occasionally want to delete your previews file, which is stored next to your Lightroom catalog. The previews file can get really big from all those standard size previews, and for some reason, Lightroom will allow you to discard one-to-one previews and will allow you to discard smart previews, but your standard previews just sit there getting bigger and bigger and bigger. However, having small catalogs isn't helping you take up less space. It's going to be taking up the same amount of space. Having one catalog means that it's easier managed for you to delete all the previews in one go. You just need to make sure that you have time to rebuild all of your standard size previews for anything that you're currently working on, because you're definitely going to need your standard size previews built for you to be able to work quickly in Lightroom. One more fail-safe that you can do if you're concerned at all about having one Lightroom catalog because you're afraid you're going to lose all of your data, is to make sure that you are writing all of your changes in Lightroom to XMP files. That is not something that is turned on by default in Lightroom. I'm going to go ahead and link an article for you guys so you can see how to do that if you have Windows or Mac. And what this does is every time Lightroom makes a change to your flags or your exposure or anything like that, it's creating a separate XMP sidecar file, which is stored with your raw data. So third-party programs can see what you've done. And also, if you needed to delete your catalog, or if your catalog were corrupt or something bad were to happen, you would very easily be able to just like re-import all of your images, and it would just pull the data from the XMP file. So it would have your presets on there and all the changes that you've made. So it's a little bit less scary knowing that that's a fail-safe that you have in place too. So if you've heard all of this and you still don't want to try it because it makes you nervous, I understand. Changing things up can be new, and maybe you just wanted to hear about it and that's why you were asking questions, but you can still have your own version of this. You can make a catalog for the year and just go to File, Import from another catalog, and just import all of your completed catalogs into one catalog, and then you'll have access to all of the same 5-star images from your entire year. You just want to make sure that they are completed catalogs that you're bringing in, because obviously it's not going to update whenever you change the smaller catalog that you're working on. You're just taking up twice as much space, which doesn't make sense to me. Do whatever you want. So yeah, thank you guys so much for this suggestion. Thank you for all of your suggestions. I'm really excited to get into next month's video, which is going to be all about optimizing Lightroom and making it run really fast, which I'm very jazzed about. Again, I really love this recommendation because it wasn't something that I was thinking about doing, because it's just something that I've done for so long that it seems so obvious to me. Like, doing it any other way would just throw such a wrench in my system. I feel like the best ideas are the ones that seem so obvious to you that you don't even think about sharing them sometimes, because it's just the thing that makes the most sense. Like, well, obviously I have one catalog for the year, but I know a lot of people don't, and so I was really happy to make this video. Thank you again for backing me on Patreon. Check out the resources below. I'm going to include a link to the importing video because it's going to be very complimentary to this video. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to talking with you guys on a podcast in just a couple of days, and I hope everybody is having a really good summer. Bye.